Hi and welcome to the Homeopathy Health Show. I'm Atiq Ahmed Bhatti, a fourth generation homeopath with over 25 years of professional experience and practice in this field of healing. The Homeopathy Health Show is the online voice of homeopathy around the world, promoting and raising awareness of this truly unique system of healing, which is suitable for all ages, young and old. Every week I invite guests from the world of homeopathy to come and share their experiences, their work, offer insights, and essentially talk all things homeopathy. Why not visit www.liketreatslike.co.uk and click on the radio and podcast button to listen to the latest episodes. So let's begin today's show here on UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio. Hi and welcome to another episode of the Homeopathy Health Show here on the UK Health Radio Network. And of course, I'm your host, Atiq Ahmed Bhatti. Now, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Caroline Gaskin to today's episode of the Homeopathy Health Show. For those who are not aware, Caroline is also known, aka, as the Menopause Homeopath. I do like that, aka, or as we know, it stands for also known as, but it's just nice because I remember that Pat Ahern from Cork in Ireland is also known as Pat Ahern, aka the homeopath farmer. So maybe I should have something like that, aka, but I don't know what I would. I don't know what I would actually come up with. Anyhow, now Caroline Gaskin is an international teacher as far as homeopathy is concerned. She is a hormonal health expert and draws from her experience working in PR for complementary health, holistic parenting, organic lifestyle, and natural health practices. She is actually one of the UK's leading homeopaths and is a flower essence practitioner and also a health coach with over 20 years of experience. So we're going to talk a lot in this episode about Caroline's journey to homeopathy, but also peri-menopause, menopause itself, and how to keep oneself in check emotionally and physically. So without further ado, I move over to my guest for today's episode, the one and only Caroline Gaskin. Caroline Gaskin, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you on the Homeopathy Health Show. I'm so happy indeed, and welcome with open arms.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry it took me so long to reply. It's just, I think we've all been so busy since this pandemic thing.
It is, isn't it? It's really strange because it's almost like we have to catch up now on things that we've missed out on.
Definitely.
I find myself like there's so many things that I haven't been able to do, and now I'm comfortable doing them. And socialize wise, and time outside and time with family and loved ones. And you just make like spur of the moment decisions and you think, you know what, I've got a couple of hours, let's do this. And you just try and do it because you've got to fill that gap of, it's been a good 2.5 years, right? Since 2.5 years of worry, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, 2.5 years of what we felt initially actually moving into something very, very different.
Yeah.
I think I just wanted to say actually, my first, I first heard about a city in China going into quarantine on the 23rd of January, 2020. And I just was, what? That happens in medieval times. What's going on? What are they trying to hide? That was exactly what I thought initially. What are they trying to hide? And so, big unfolding and lots of different emotions and lots of different feelings that I guess we've never felt before in that time, and that is really juicy for homeopaths because we look at how it feels, how it is for the person that we're talking to.
You know what was quite sad for me, actually, it still is that I've met people now, you can't always meet all your friends immediately, and these things take time. But when I do bump into people I've sort of grown up with, everyone's, and myself included, of course, the first thing is, oh, how are you? But after that, it's like, oh, you've aged, And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's sad because you haven't seen that process, you know, and now they're just a bit more older. I know it's only 2 years, it's not much, but when you do actually see someone after that period of time, 2 or 3 years, it can, you know, it does look so different, doesn't it? And people are just a bit more older and slightly different habits,
It can do. Yeah. I think something that we've been talking about in the last few weeks is the sense that, you know, we grow up with an idea that time is linear. And as we move into the healing space, we understand time is very, very non-linear. And you might meet someone that, you know, cropped up in a dream or cropped up in, I don't know, after you know, when you have a homeopathic remedy and it takes you back to a time in your life when perhaps some healing, some kind of shuffling needs to go on, you know, that it's almost like you go back and you sift and you sort and you file some stuff, I think, with a homeopathic remedy. And that kind of sense that time is non-linear begins to evolve. But I feel that massively post-COVID, that people are not able to recall when something happened. You know, was it 2 years ago? Was it 3? Was it 8 years ago? You know, and so this sense that the way that we see time is a little warped, you know, and again, we have remedies for that.
Brilliant. I was waiting for you to say that.
Yeah.
And
you
we
know, because
actually
you
do
read
as well.
that, you read that when you're studying, you know, time passes slowly or time passes fast. And it takes you a little while to get into asking the person in front of you what their perception of time is like. And, you know, it's another thing I know there's lots we could talk about, but it's something that I've been talking about recently is your response to trauma. And we're so used to saying fight, flight, freeze, fright, you know, what is the response, but how that actually manifests for somebody, you know, so if you're somebody who went into flight at the point of trauma, then you're going to be fruitlessly busy. You're going to be the one who's always busy, who never has time for themselves, who has the perception that time is too short because you're on the run. You know, you've been on the run for a long time. And that might look like, you know, busyness and productiveness, but it can also be an avoidance of really becoming grounded, you know, becoming focused, becoming in touch with yourself, because the self has been a difficult place to be because of that original trauma. And the same with, you know, I was talking to a friend recently who lost a parent, and I was conscious that when she comes into an issue in life, it's pretty much always conflict. It's pretty much always turns into a bit of a fight. And I was like, wow, actually your trauma response is to be a fighter, you know, is to put the shield on and kind of push into the issue, whereas other people might be frightened of that and move away because their fear response was the fright or the freeze. You know, the freeze might mean that you're stuck in a situation, a relationship, or it might mean that you're stuck in a job that you don't like and you can't manifest your dreams, you know. So I feel there's more and more kind of, again, unfolding and understanding of how we are post-COVID. I think it's a very interesting time.
You know, it's
post-pandemic, I should say.
I'm fascinated by what you're saying, because I found that, I mean, I'll give you an example. Just a few weeks ago, I had a consultation with somebody, and I said, look, you know, everything's okay now, and you can get out and about. And the response was, I don't want to. I don't want to do that anymore.
Wow.
And that really stunned me, because I actually didn't know what to say. I thought, oh, I'm happy now. I'm comfortable living at home and doing everything at home. I don't really miss my friends. I don't really want to socialize. I just don't want to do it. And I'm comfortable. But the fact that they are, or they feel, or the perception is that they're comfortable, I don't know. I mean, that really?
Yeah, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Absolutely. Is it a point, you know, which we're always looking for with our clients, is at what point did you change tack and why? And is that necessarily a bad thing? You know, yeah, definitely spoke to parents who said, you know, my child who's challenged, maybe has some developmental issues, is just so much happier not having to face the school bus, not having to face a busy environment with uncertainty and people they don't know, maybe being the carer that day. And, there's a lot of things that I think have come out of the space that have made people really think about what makes them tick in quite a homeopathic way. Question things a bit.
But also it's worrying though, isn't it?
I mean, it's okay to have a rest and step back, but yeah, that is worrying. The bigger picture is worrying.
I've had a few comments like this, and it's always like, look, I just what you've said. I said, look, human beings, we're social. We need to interact, and besides, it's part of progress in life. Whether you fail or whether you succeed, that's not the question. It's just being out there, being able to socialize, because that's part of progress. Otherwise, how much progress can you make on your own? It's very, very limited and very, very difficult, And who are you going to share that with as well?
Yeah, exactly. I saw a fascinating little GIF, or maybe it was an Instagram post or something, of a cell very, very close up, and the mitochondria exchanging its little kind of electricity, sort of switching things on and switching them off. And I was wowed by that, the amount of communication that was going on in one cell. And we have millions of them.
Yeah, millions. Amazing, isn't it? It really
absolutely
is.
Incredible. Yeah.
Now, Caroline, we went very deep very quickly. I want to go back to the start. I have a question for you. Now, originally, people may not know this actually, that Caroline studied fine art textiles at Goldsmiths, and she actually ran her own print studio before stepping into the field or the service to humanity through homeopathy and other natural therapies. So do tell me, how was that like, actually, working in fine art textiles? I mean, was that something you grew up with and had a passion for, or?
Yeah, very much so. I drew from a very, very young age. So I drew from, I think, less than 2. I picked up a pencil and drew things. And my first drawing, in fact, was a bird. And I have a passion for bird watching, which is interesting.
Oh, interesting.
But I drew all my life, and I guess it was something. I was also an avid reader, and I think, like many people, that was a kind of, I hid a bit in reading, and I drew a lot. So and I would kind of read under the covers at night as a kid, that kind of stuff. I had a torch, and yeah, I was just a bookworm, and so I didn't. There's lots of things about growing up that you don't realize until you're grown up and you actually start to talk to other people about how things were, particularly the age that we're at, without that kind of like level of communication that kids have now. And so at the age of 8, I was going to be an interior designer, and that was it. So I studied art. It was what I did at school. And then in the UK, the way that you go into art is you do a foundation course and then you do your degree. And on the foundation course, it was like going back to nursery school. I just played with materials and absolutely loved it. And we had all these different subjects like sculpture and ceramics and things that we didn't do at school. School was quite formal, really. We learned to draw representationally, and we learned to paint representational stuff. And then you went to foundation course and just started to get messy. And suddenly I was doing like enormous pieces of artwork. And I really got into color and texture and realized that actually I was far more interested in color and texture than I was in the interior of houses. And that's when I started to get into textiles. And it was a time of the New Romantics. So, we were all wearing kind of yards of cloth and kind of yeah, so it kind of was a natural progression. And then someone sort of said to me, and this similar thing happened with homeopathy. They said, "You're Goldsmith's material," and I was like, "What does that mean?" And they said, "You're autonomous, you're a free thinker. You should apply for Goldsmiths." And I went with bundles of material and huge pieces of artwork, and they said, "Great, we'll have you." But it was a really interesting experience going for the interview, because it was literally the Monday after the first Brixton riots in 1980, I believe that was. It was either 80 or, yeah, it was 1980. So it would have, no, or 1981. But anyway, I came out of Oval Tube Station in London, and the whole place was like on fire. It was sort of smoking after the riots. And I was just like, oh, this is what London's like. Wow, okay. You know, I think I was a complete space cadet. And it was no wonder, actually, when I early saw a homeopath, that she gave me Mederinum to kind of like get me a little bit more back down to earth. But anyway, I came out of the tube and I went off the interview and I was given a place. And Goldsmiths requires you to be autonomous, to get on with work yourself. Nobody's going to say to you, this is what you need to do. And so it's incredibly creative. And that's where a lot of the YBAs, the Young British Artists, were training as well. I was there at that time. Damien Hirst, you know, all those people were there, Sarah Lucas. And so it was a Grenville Davy. There's just loads of them. And we were in the textiles department, and then they were the fine artists. And there was this kind of like iron curtain in the middle of the building. It was like the textile artists for one end, fine artists for the other end. And we'd go down to the basement to the, and it was like something out of a book. The basement was the welding, you know, the kind of the cast iron, you know, you could do anything you wanted down there. And there were these technicians, you know, who would help you create whatever it was that was in your mind. So it was just this incredible melting pot, but you had to be autonomous. You had to be self-motivated to get through. And I'm saying that because those are the kind of things that one needs to cultivate to be, you know, to have a thriving practice, to be a homeopath, to be a natural health practitioner. And I think you need to recognize, if you don't have those characteristics, that you either need to cultivate them or you need to find somebody that it kind of is a little bit like your agent in that, you know. So, and then I had my own print studio, which I loved, and we did lots of stuff for Camden Market, and you know, the goal was to sort of get it into magazines and clubs, and work for a company called Boy London, and yeah, just loved my work. And then we had kids really young, so really there was this point where it was like, don't think we can have two freelancers in the house and two young kids and be an earth mother, bake bread and, you know, play with them and stuff like that. So, you know, life took a different tack, but actually that bit about complementary therapy had been there for a really long time, or that questioning health, you know, asking questions about health had been there for a really long time for me. And even though I kind of consider that in my early 20s, I wasn't particularly healthy, we were using some nasty toxins, you know, in the print work room. We'd wash our hands with stuff called Seri Wash. It was supposed to clean the screens with it, but they never had anything proper to clean your hands with. So we would use this nasty chemical. And so I was kind of exposed, as quite a sensitive person, exposed to a lot of chemicals at that time. And I went to the doctor and they said, oh, here's some cream for the rash. And I put it on, and of course the rash went away, but I was given Umivate or some like nasty steroid. And I got payback, you know, when I first had homeopathy.
You know, it just reminded me when you mentioned chemicals that I remember growing up, for no fault of my own, I always seemed to be around car mechanics. And they used something called, I think it's still available, something called Swafiger.
Yes, it is. I have a little bit in the house. Yeah. It can be useful for a few things. Yeah,
but it really gets the grease off. But
yeah, that's what we were meant to have in the studio, but they never had it. It'd always run out. They never had rubber gloves. They never had anything proper to wash your hands with. If we were doing dyeing, you know, fabric in the studio, we would take the dye off our hands with bleach. I'm terrible.
That's real toxicity,
really
isn't it?
Bad.
That's actually not life changing. That's skin changing, isn't it?
It took me years of homeopathy to stop doing skin stuff. And you know, for those of you that are listening that, you know, maybe don't know the homeopathic story, when we give the principles, when we give a remedy, we have a few principles, and one is that we will heal from within out. So where I'd used the steroid cream and kind of driven those toxins into my body. My body was showing me that I had an issue on the skin. It was saying, hey, Caroline, this rash is showing you've got some nasty stuff inside that you need to deal with. And because I wasn't in that conversation, I didn't know that. So I went to the doctor, got some cream, it went away, and I stuffed all that toxins right inside, in my liver. I didn't have a particularly great, even from childhood, tendency towards what we call being constipated. So I didn't have a good system of elimination as a child. As a young adult, wasn't really particularly looking after myself well. So those steroids kind of stuffed all that back in. When I went to the homeopath, that had to come out, and so what would happen is I would take a remedy, and then after about 3 or 4 weeks, I'd get the rash back on my skin, and I'd go back to the homeopath, and they'd say, right, time for another remedy. It's manifesting again on your skin. It's showing us it's time to stir the pot, if you like, inside with another remedy and throw that out. And it took me a really long time, like years. I first went to a homeopath with my son when I was 28. I think the last time I threw out stuff on my skin, I was 48.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
that
a
was
long time.
arsenicum for anyone who wants to know.
It's amazing, isn't it, though, that the body is such that when we are sort of, let's say, damaged, I suppose, by chemicals or overuse of chemicals, that they can reside in the body for years. I mean, you know about asbestos and mesothelioma, of course.
Absolutely.
And those from the 50s and 60s, and only now, 30 years, even 40 years after, the symptoms are coming to the front, and they're being diagnosed with mesothelioma, which is actually quite a serious. Well, it's a very serious condition, but it's on the rise, in some parts of the world.
And because the timing is now, and also we're in the time of lung disease, COVID, SARS, MERS, these are all respiratory diseases, and respiratory diseases will manifest on the skin as well. So quite often someone will come with a rash, and I'm like, well, actually, we need to treat your lungs. Tell me about your lung history. Let's go back in time. But also, the other thing about chemicals throughout the 20th and 21st century is, particularly with pesticides, some of those are cumulative, which means that their action becomes magnified over time. And, that I work quite a lot with hormones. What happens when a woman's something like follicle stimulating hormone ramps up at menopause? It wakes up those old, pesticides that mimic our hormones. And so we suddenly got a storm of anxiety at menopause, which harks back to having had these pesticides in our system, sitting there, waiting to be ignited, and Melissa Asselin writes about that when she writes about folliculinum. Go and have a look at, for anyone who's listening, her essay Mist or Miasm, and she talks about this with I'm going to get the name of it wrong. It's diethyl something or other. It's a type of estrogen, but it's a steroid, I believe, a steroid hormone, and that kind of sits there in the system, and it also crosses the placental barrier. So I get women coming in, and I'm sure you do, and it's like, well, I've never been on the pill. Why am I manifesting these symptoms? It's like, yeah, well, your mum was given this diethyl blah, blah. Sorry, I can't remember all those names. I'm good with the homeopathic names. But mothers were given that during pregnancy for the symptoms of pregnancy. And then the child is carrying that. And that's manifesting later down the line when there's a little bit more in the melting pot, and that's follicle stimulating hormone is also stimulating these latent dyscrasias, we might call them, that are sitting in the system. And it's taken me quite a long time to understand what is happening when women have massive surges of anxiety at menopause. It's like, why is this happening? This didn't used to happen. It didn't used to happen 25 years ago. Like you said, the how do we say
mesothelioma.
Mesothelioma. I know what it is. Some of these things I have to read. But that is manifesting now, because the lungs have got weaker as we get older. And so, or maybe something like the respiratory syndrome virus has ignited that again. Something is waking up, something that's latent in the system. And it necessarily means that we have to get more complex about our prescribing as well. So I have some clients currently where I'm exploring B12 as a remedy. Now, we don't have a picture of that. We know what happens if we don't have enough of it. And it's like, for cancer patients, that could actually be a really useful remedy. And so I feel like we very quickly need to be doing some provings of these states of depletion, because obviously if you don't have the B vitamins, then you're going to be susceptible to these respiratory viruses, and so we need to get some even more remedies out there, I think.
Absolutely. I think so many people now I see who have essentially a nutritional deficiency, and I always try to explain to them, I said, because the first response is when you say something like that is always, no, but I take, I take supplements, or vitamins. And I said, yes, but look, it's one thing taking a vitamin, but it's another thing absorbing what you actually need from that tablet. And I always, this is not a prescription. I'm just saying generally, personally speaking, I always say go for the oral ones because, they're absorbed much faster than dropping into your stomach as a tablet and then being dissolved through the process of the acid in the stomach,
Yeah, so like a spray, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We know some sprays are out there and they work really, really well. But so many people are not able to absorb. And that's why, and then as a result of that, they're very, the vitamins themselves, they've got a nutritional deficiency as such. And that can sometimes, that's the building blocks, the 12 inorganic salts, for example, and we can go on and on. But if you haven't got that, then of course you're going to have problems. And then if you have underlying problems or shadows from the past that have carried on within yourself, that's, of course, is going to play havoc, isn't it, with the cells? Because the cells are thinking, well, hang on, what am I supposed to be doing here,
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, we do need things like the tissue salts, the bowel nosodes, I think really need a little bit of a kind of revisit, a revamp for most homeopaths, because I think they could be utilized much more efficiently for correcting the gut, and I'm sending a lot of clients for a microbiome analysis just so that they can see in front of them a test that says, you have too much Campylobacter, this is driving your anxiety. And then you can say, take a remedy, take some ashwagandha, we can correct this. But many clients need to see it in front of them on a test, and that you say they'll say, oh, but I am taking so-and-so. And we're like, yeah, but it's not being absorbed. We have to look to the gut. And also post-COVID, we're seeing this even worse absorption. So I'm seeing a lot of people with no ferritin. They just don't have. They're just not able to absorb iron efficiently.
That's actually a big thing, isn't it? That is a big thing. You're so absolutely right, because so many people are coming with that presenting complaint now, aren't they, of low iron levels or anemia.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is no one size fits all, but we could find that tissue salts like, Kalophos, Ferrimphos, Calcphos, that these are primary, and we're putting these together for almost all patients who have this kind of deficiency alongside whatever other remedies we're giving. And so we are oftentimes pushed into more polypharmacy than what we're taught, I think.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you've got the best interest for the patient, then you have a toolbox, and
absolutely.
you can you can be an artist, and that actually goes back to what you were saying, because you love color and texture, and it's quite interesting because, so the science aside, homeopathy is very much an individual art, isn't it? So you have become a very incredible artist, I have to say, and you are known around the world, which does take me to something very interesting, because you're not known primarily as Caroline Gaskin, but you are known as the Menopause Homeopath, which, by the way, is a lovely AKA. I love that,
Thank you. It took me ages to choose it, by the way.
It's so cool. It's very hip. I love it. Why don't you go and talk to the Menopause Homeopath? Is that, pardon? But I was going to ask you with that, because that's very much something that you're focused upon, and something you've helped so many people with around the world, namely menopause. And we were talking just before the recording, and I mentioned to you that nowadays, previously, even nowadays, people are saying, I'm going through the menopause. But, when you actually think about it, there's peri, and then there's post, isn't it? So maybe for people's understanding, you can share your wisdom and clarify what happens prior, maybe a year prior, what is during, and what is that called? And then certainly what happens after.
Yeah, thank you. I think, the first thing for most people to realize is, and this is, people supporting women, and you could be listening and thinking, oh, it's my mum that's going through menopause, or my partner that's going through menopause, or my daughter that's going through menopause, and she's struggling much more than I ever did, so we, all of us, all women will go through menopause at some point. Unfortunately, we are seeing ever younger women with POI, poly ovarian insufficiency syndrome, basically. And so what that means is that they never really, some women never really get their periods properly, or premature ovarian insufficiency is the ovaries just really grinding to a halt in a very, very young woman. And we are seeing more of that. So we are seeing more issues around not even coming to true fertility. But for most women, we'll come into fertility, and I'll always ask a woman, when's menarche? When did your periods start? And then we'll do the whole health history, were there pregnancies? Were you on the pill? How was your period throughout your life? Did it change, when you had babies? Did it change after a miscarriage, or the morning after pill, or whatever, what's in the timeline? And then, there's the peri-menopause period, and menopause itself. We were not taught as a separate subject at college, and I graduated in 2000, and neither was your doctor taught menopause. Your GP, your MD taught menopause as a separate subject. And this is news to most people. We've been talking about menopause since probably the middle of the 19th century, and the term was coined, and we began to try and adjust a woman's cycle. But it's really ramped up, and it's ramped up because of the 20th century and the 21st century, and the toxins that we, and the environmental hazards, et cetera, and the poor food and denatured food. I mean, there is this thing about, menopause is a deficiency disease. It's like, yeah, so is diabetes, so is most thyroid issues. Many diseases are deficiency diseases because we don't have the nutrition that we need to be fully functioning human beings. And so this term peri-menopause, I mean, when I went through menopause, menopause is when your periods stop. So when you haven't had periods for a year, that is menopause. And very occasionally women will have another period after that time, usually because of an emotional shock or trauma, perhaps because of a new partner or a new sexual engagement, interest that can bring on periods, perhaps something like a change of climate, job, location, etc. So things might start the periods up again. Occasionally supplements do, or possibly even homeopathy. But for the vast majority of women, periods stop after a year, and then we're into post-menopause. So menopause is just a fulcrum, it's a point at which the periods have stopped. And up until any changes that are going on are really peri-menopause. And what we're seeing at the moment, which is good in some ways, is women in pre-menopause saying, I want to be ready. I'm looking at my sisters who are struggling. How can I prepare myself? And that's actually wonderful. That is amazing that women are asking those questions and thinking about looking after themselves before the event, because they'll get through it easier. And so 10 years ago, peri-menopause just wasn't a term. It's a new term to describe this period of time that perhaps used to be a couple of years of changes, 18 months, 2 years, to really possibly 10 years of subtle change. And normally what happens in that perimenopausal period is we're wrestling with imbalanced blood sugar, perhaps built on an increasing deficiency, of nutrients, of minerals. And then we kind of get into what I call true menopause. So this 18 months, 2 years, perhaps a year, when things are really, really changing. And there we're looking at kind of calming down the action of the liver often. So things like hot flushes, sleepless nights, sweats, etc., are much more the domain of the liver. And we're usually looking at, again, the kidney, adrenal, ovary axis becoming meridian becoming a bit worn out. So we're looking at these two organs that should be friends, kind of moving away from each other. So there's a lot of, in menopause, you need to nurture and add in nutrition for ovaries, kidneys, adrenals, because adrenals are going to take over the role of producing hormones. And then we need to sort of calm down the action of the liver. So it can be a fantastic time to cleanse, to let go of some of those chemicals, let go of some of this cumulative toxins that we have in our life. And then we move into post-menopause. So periods have stopped. And I usually say to women, you need to look after the 3 Bs. You need to look after bones, brain, and bladder, so that you can carry, wisdom, continence into your older years, and, bring through something to the world in terms of wisdom and creativity that perhaps previously, when you were fertile or struggling with fertility, you were on a different kind of mission. It's like lower creative chakra, babies or not, until you have menopause. And then menopause, you can start to be upper creative chakra, the throat. If the thyroid's not knackered, then you can speak your truth. You can support others in their journey. I think we've yet to come into the power of older womanhood and what we have to offer the world, because the world needs that wisdom really right now.
I think it's really beautiful the way you've just said that, you spoke about nutrition, you spoke about the time for a detox and the liver. And, for those women who are listening, going through menopause, I think that's that's real wisdom, because rather than fight it, you can actually embrace it and actually improve it. Or should I say, it's an opportunity to improve yourself, because you can go through homeopathy and obviously other natural accompaniments as such. You can work to, this is the perfect time, like you said, to have a detox and to do this and to
let go
up
of
my
some
nutrition.
Stuff. Yeah, definitely. And I think we have yet to engage with the magic of that transition. We're used to the magic of other hormonal transitions like pregnancy. We're used to some extent to the magic of an excitement of teenage years, moving into womanhood. And yet that elderhood, we tend to have quite negative constructs around. And so there is a bit of wrestling with the way that society is constructed, and that how does it feel to get older? How does it feel to drop some of those things? A lot of fear can come up. And that's where homeopathy is amazing. Homeopathy is magic. It's the icing on the cake. It can really, really help with those emotional states, and as can flower essences. I think we've got so many wonderful tools to address anxiety, apprehension, depression, feeling, like you can't think straight, brain fog, those kind of things, fear of getting older. So many wonderful resources that we have.
It is an amazing toolbox, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah.
One can never become stuck, I think, because there's so much that is out there and so much that is available and so much that can work together in synergy and in harmony.
Yeah, I love that concept of harmony's wonderful. That's things working alongside each other, kind of coming to the fore, moving back, moving together. And then synergy, that idea of the individual parts might be amazing, but put them together and we have something which is bigger than the individual parts. That is true community, whether it's the community of your cells or community of people, it's sort of, there's something greater. And I think that's, again, is the kind of magic, isn't it? That companionship, that idea of, I was talking about it the other day, of companion planting that we have in permaculture, where we put two plants together and they are of mutual benefit for each other.
I must say, talking to you, that I often get told, should I say, that I'm very calm, but you're on another level. I think you take that
today
phrase.
Only, okay.
You take that phrase, okay. I have a question for you, which is, a lot of the ladies that come to see me who perhaps are suffering from menopause, or just even a general statement as far as menopause is concerned, it can be very destructive on the joints, and it can play havoc with one's emotions and the mind. So what advice would you give those who say the menopause is causing me problems, deformities of the joints, especially the knuckle area and the knee joints as well, and then at the same time also feeling, I suppose, lost, confused, and not knowing, what to do anymore because of the emotional state that one is in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing about, what you suffer at menopause, just to know, is that we see different symptoms in different demographics of women. So studies show that, women in rural Turkey had menopause much younger and suffered a lot of joint issues, as they did in Bangkok. But this Bangkok study, which is quite well known, and then if you come to the UK or America, you'll see different symptoms that come to the fore. So I would say for myself, I went through most of those symptoms to some degree or another. And so when I first started experiencing some pain in my knuckles, and I was really quite alarmed. I mean, they actually kind of looked like they were getting bigger, and they throbbed, and I could feel that. That for me is like reach for the homeopathic remedies. And there you want the symptom similar remedy, and to understand that you probably need some anti-inflammatory foods, and I would say something like essential fatty acids would be my first choice, and to be aware of the foods which can inflame joints, and you won't be stuck in that forever. This is transit. This should be transition. And so anti-inflammatory foods, essential fatty acids, being conscious of the foods that might inflame the joints, and then doing things like making sure that you increase magnesium in your life, so you're drawing up the nutrients that the joints need, is fundamental. And I kind of sometimes I feel like I'm being a bit boring when I say the same things are needed for each stage of menopause, but for different reasons when it comes to nutrients. And then we can add in kind of extra special stuff if we have a particular issue. And, the homeopathy, flower essences, etc., is icing on the cake. So, really kind of weaves through it like a golden thread through the whole lot. So some things are very specific, and we can get specific with remedies, and some things are more generalized. So when you use the word lost, I immediately think of a remedy like Ignatia. What have you lost? What are you grieving about? Because there is going to be a loss of some aspect of yourself, and is that necessarily a bad thing? So just to give an example, when I was at some point in peri-menopause, and I would think I was around late 40s. Before my periods, so my cycle was 28 days on the dot for the whole of my life. Whatever I did, whether I had babies, took the pill, had miscarriages, my cycle would go back to 28-day cycle. And that shows that I have a robust constitution. And it also shows that I probably have fairly fertile constitution. And that's kind of the way it was born. And, we're looking always to try to get back to the 28-day cycle, just to explain, because so many women don't know they're meant to have a 28-day cycle. And we're meant to ovulate sometime between the day 9, if we take the period as day 0, day 1 of the cycle. We're meant to ovulate between day 9 and 14. Many women just don't know that and don't see their ovulation, don't understand it. And so we need to be shown this, taught this, and we're not in school. So that's a lesson. But for myself, I got to this point, probably, as I say, I was around 48. And I started to get breast tenderness a week before my period. Now, I had some breast tenderness. I'm talking about this because this is what the homeopaths are looking for. I had that previously. And if I was talking to myself in practice, I would be like, so have you had this before? Yeah, I did have a bit of breast tenderness when I was younger. Okay, maybe there was an element of toxicity, etc. Anyway, this was happening a week before my period, and then it would stop, and then my period would come. And I was like, what? And I just divided and sort of mentally divided the cycle, the 28 days, up into spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And I was like, I am in the autumn of my years. I'm gathering in the fruit of fertility, and I'm looking it over, and I'm going to move into the winter. And I suddenly felt really upset, and then I was upset because where my body was showing me there was an issue, the breast, was where I'd previously enjoyed feeding my children many, many years before. And I was suddenly mourning the fact that I was never going to feed a baby again. And so I had to look at, menopause made me look at motherhood, and it made me look at how fundamentally important that had been to me, and how I wasn't going to be mothering, even though I haven't fed my babies for a long time. I wasn't going to be mothering in a certain sort of way. And then, weirdly, I can't remember how much later it was, I was walking past a shop and I saw a cuddly toy, and I had my first, what I would call, grandmotherly moment. Where I suddenly thought, I wonder if my kids will have grandchildren. I could buy them a cuddly toy. So all that, these were thoughts I'd never had before. And it was years since I'd thought about feeding my kids, particularly. And suddenly I was faced with a time of, and it was quite brief, of mourning and honoring that part of my life that I wasn't going to be doing anymore. And so it's all messages that our body is telling us. If the joints are aching, it could be that they're there in the family timeline. It could be that there's some toxicity to shift, highly likely. And our body only knows what it does. So it will only do the family timeline stuff. If you have certain illnesses in your family, those are the things that you might be prompted a little bit at menopause. And it's an opportunity to have a prescription and to clear that state from, your kind of field, really, So anxiety, depression. Some women, it's the first time they've ever experienced that in their life. For others, it's like, oh, hello, old friend, you're back, are you? What's this about? I definitely took a fair amount of Aurum in my, and that's not a remedy that we're taught generally as a woman's remedy, but it's a fantastic remedy if you feel depressed before your periods. And then the Aurum murs. Aurum mur is actually, I think, a breast cancer remedy. And Aurum muriaticum natrinatum is things like endometriosis. So Aurum, gold that we derive the remedy from. Aurum was used as pessaries to prevent implantation of the ovum. So not many people know that in the 1930s, women used gold pessaries to prevent being pregnant. So there's a message in there. You know, I don't want to have more babies. Why don't I want to have more babies? What's that about? You know, we can get quite deep with some of this, and that's good. It's good to, you know, if it was a garden, the first thing you're going to do is dig over the soil, dig a bit deep, and then you can plant the flowers.
That's why you're called the Menopause Homeopath. That was, I have to say, very eloquently and very beautifully put. And
thank you.
I think it's going to give a lot of peace to those listening who are perhaps going through this life-changing experience.
Don't suffer alone.
Absolutely. Caroline, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and we've really had some fun conversations as well via the Insta Live as well. So, you know, I'm sort of delighted that we can also share this podcast to the listeners, and I really very much look forward to speaking to you very, very soon.
Thank you so much. It's been a real joy actually to talk about all that.
I've been waiting a very long time, and it's finally come, and it's been epic. I loved it.
Thank you.
I do hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the Homeopathy Health Show. Please do support the show by clicking follow on my socials. Remember, the more exposure the podcast receives, the better for homeopathy around the world. You can find me on Instagram by searching for @like_treatslike, and on both Facebook and TikTok by searching for @like_treatslike. So let's promote the voice of homeopathy on radio and podcast around the world together. Don't forget to visit me online at www.liketreatslike.co.uk and click on the radio and podcast tab. Here you'll be able to see all the guests that have joined me on the show so far, and of course you can stream on demand the latest episode to your mobile, tablet or PC. Until next time, stay safe and take care.